You're listening to the Good Food CFO Podcast, where we challenge the status quo of the food industry, celebrate good food founders who are building businesses on their own terms, introduce industry disruptors, and are redefining equitability. If you're ready to build your financial confidence and join the good food revolution to change the way the food industry does business, you are in the right place. I'm the Good Food CFO and your host, Sarah Delavan. Welcome to our very first live recording of the Good Food CFO Podcast. I'm joined by Felice Thorpe, Sales Director Consultant and founder of Felice Foods, and we're talking about networking with intention. Networking is so important for personal and professional success because we can't build businesses alone. And quite frankly, it's more fun with a supportive network. But networking can feel scary, uncomfortable, too salesy, or aimless if you don't approach it with intention. Felice is hands down the best networker and connector I know, and she happens to do it with a lot of intention and in very little time. In this episode, she is sharing the 2 reasons for networking, the value she gets and gives to her network, the tricks she uses to stay in the know regarding industry events, and she's answering questions from our live audience. Let's get to it. Felice, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited to do this live with you in front of some of the members of our Good Food CFO Plus membership. We wanted to do a fun and valuable topic for our very first live podcast recording. And so when I thought of fun, I immediately thought of you. You're so much fun to have on the podcast. And when I thought about something valuable, I had this memory of a conversation that you and I had recently where I asked you how much time you spent networking because you're such a master at networking. And I was shocked by your answer. And I'm going to keep your answer a secret, but I wanted people to know that that is the reason that this episode is existing. You are a master networker, and the answer to how you're so good at it and how much time you spend networking just blew my mind. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into that and talk about it today.
Okay. We'll save that.
Little tease. Okay. So I wanted to share some words that people use to describe networking. Terrible, scary, uncomfortable, a waste of time, some of the time, sometimes amazing, and too salesy. And when I was hearing these words, I thought, this resonates with me. And I remember back to when I was in corporate and thinking God, I have to go to this networking event. And it's basically just me asking people for things. It felt very like I was taking, and it wasn't a two-way street. And then I remember when I was changing careers, going from corporate to the food industry, and I realized I wanted to meet people, that networking was going to be important. And I actually started to enjoy it. And I wanted to ask you, how have you always been good at networking? Have you always felt comfortable doing it? Or was it something that you learned to do and enjoy over time?
Well, I'm a consulting sales director. So sales is obviously, you have to be comfortable talking to strangers, right?
Yeah, that's true.
A real formative experience I had with that, funny enough, was when I was my daughter's Girl Scout troop leader and we had to sell Girl Scout cookies. And we set up shop in front of, grocery stores in our town, and the girls had to approach people walking up and ask them if they wanted cookies. And I'd say 40 to 50% of the time they would buy cookies.
Yeah.
The other times they wouldn't. And sometimes they would be just downright rude, right? But what it did was it kind of built up. And this is when my daughters were very, very young, and it kind of helped thicken my skin, and it helped thicken their skin regarding just cold calling or approaching people and being comfortable with that. And it was like a really great thing to witness with young girls, because there is a lot of fear / imposter syndrome / what am I doing around talking to strangers. And so having children do this early on and witnessing it early on and seeing the, real positive outcome of it ultimately, I think was just a great lesson for me at that point in my early career.
Yeah.
And really, honestly, I say this with meaning, it really helped me become comfortable talking to people, talking to strangers. Yeah.
Yeah. I was never comfortable doing that. Like if I was selling Girl Scout cookies, it was like, if they come to the table, they'll buy, you know what I mean? Like then that means they want to buy. There's like no rejection. Like there's no like feeling uncomfortable, and totally when I felt forced to go to a networking event, like early in my career, gosh, I would just be a wallflower. Or like if I knew someone, I could kind of like saddle up alongside of them and like start a conversation, and now I don't know what happened really, but now I get invited to parties because people are like, she'll talk to everybody. Like you don't have, I don't have to take care of you. And like, yeah,
that's how I see you. And every single person you meet knows something you don't know. Yeah. Every single person, from the person that checking your car in at the car wash to a CEO, like all of those people know something you don't know. And if you keep that in mind, it's really a mindset of like, what am I going to learn today, or what am I going to learn from this person?
Yeah.
So it's really having an open mind is so important to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, knowing that like whenever you're meeting someone for the first time, like if you're a little bit uncomfortable, like they might be too, you know what I mean? And just kind of like recognizing it, but like trying to not let it kind of overtake you. So you weren't always good at, it wasn't inherent for you. It was something that you learned to kind of be comfortable talking to people. It sounds like after that experience with your daughter. Were you doing sales at that time?
I was, but I was always a little bit cautious about approaching the fear of rejection. Either they weren't going to buy my product, or they weren't going to have time for me, we all have fear of rejection in some way, but as far as my professional world is concerned, I really don't have that anymore. I just feel like not everyone is going to say yes, and not everyone's going to say no. And that's just the nature of sales. So yeah.
I think too, like when I think about my transition from feeling like terrible, scary, uncomfortable, salesy when it came to networking, was this realization that it's not all about getting something from people. That may be what we are taught when we're younger, like, oh, you network to get something, or you network to sell something. But I think the real experience of networking is so much greater than that. And I wanted to ask you, like, what do you, in your own words, see as the value or values that you get from networking and from connecting people?
I really look at networking, and you and I have spoken about this, about kind of two different purposes. One purpose is that like organic, my ears and eyes are open to whatever brings me. I'm going to this party. I don't know any of these people. And, I'm just curious about where this is going to go. And then the other is more intentional, where it's like, I'm going to this trade show and my purpose is to meet this specific buyer or, category manager. And so I need to network to get to that person. So those are kind of the two different ways I look at it. And they're equally as important. And I think you do both.
Yeah. Yeah. We should share the story. I think we shared it once before on the podcast, but about how you and I met. And I can't remember the name of the app. Do you remember the name of the app?
I don't. I think I deleted it.
I don't have it on my phone anymore either. But if you're listening and you remember during the pandemic, there was an app where you could like go into a room and you could kind of get called up to the stage or whatever it was called, and you could talk and people could hear. And I don't remember what it was called. Maybe someone who's here on the live, if you remember the name, you can pop it into the chats in the comment. But apparently you and I were in a room. Clubhouse.
Yes, Clubhouse. Thank you.
Clubhouse.
Thank you, Charlotte.
We were both on Clubhouse in a room that had to do with consulting of some sort. I don't remember this. You reminded me of this. And so I, was talking. I love to talk. So I was talking about, my experience owning a consulting business. You heard me talking, and then I believe you found me on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you reached out to me via LinkedIn.
Yep.
And so take me through that, if you will. Like I have my idea of like what was going through your head and what you wanted out of that relationship or connection, but can you kind of tell the story from your point of view in terms of like why you did it and what you were hoping the outcome would be?
Yeah. So I'm a believer in, surrounding yourself with people that if you want to do something or you have a goal of a place that you want to be, find people that have done that and learn from them or get their, feedback. Most people are extremely generous with their time and are willing to give 30 minutes to talk about their journey. And I, at the time, wanted to go into consulting as a sales director. And I knew that you had been doing it for a while and you were a woman and you were in the food industry. And I didn't know, it's still sort of a smallish group of people that we are doing this. So I was like, oh my gosh, this person, I have to just get half an hour of her time to find out like how she did it or why she did it or how it's going. So that was really my purpose to join Clubhouse. Wasn't that it was really just like, I need to hear from the outside world.
Yeah.
But once I heard your story, then I was like, aha, this is somebody that, I can connect with and take notes with if she's willing to share any information with me. So it was one of those very, very common stories you hear about networking where you go into it really with no purpose. It's just sort of a curiosity. And then, you end up meeting the person that is exactly the person that you needed to meet at that time. So I find that that's like really what networking does often is I don't see it as a waste of time because I think like, first of all, what's 30 minutes, right? Or 15 minutes or, whatever amount of time you're going to dedicate to chatting with that person. And kind of on a funny personal note, I got a divorce and my sister talked me into doing online dating. She set up my profile for me and everything. And I had to basically network, right, with all these people. Like I met online, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to put myself out there and meet these people. And it was really like the first one was super awkward. And then like 8 dudes in, I'm like, okay, I this is comfortable. I can do this. I feel okay. And it's kind of the same way with networking. It's like you feel a little intimidated at first, but really the more you exercise that muscle, the easier it becomes.
Yeah. And your story from how we met is interesting. It's making me realize too, that like networking can also just be showing up and sharing, right? Like I showed up into this space. I remember being early in the morning. I was probably in my pajamas, like down in the kitchen on Clubhouse, you know what I mean? And decided to share, thought I had something to contribute. And it led to a really wonderful relationship that we have now personally and professionally. And so it's like the seed of that was just showing up and not, again, with no particular purpose other than to like listen and share. And that was it. I didn't expect anything to come out of it, and one of my favorite relationships in the industry, is a result of it. So it's really, really kind of cool and wonderful. So at the beginning of the episode, I kind of hinted at that I had asked you this question about networking. So I'll share that you're amazing at like sending articles that are like right on the nose of things that I should be reading and that I should be aware of. You're the one who shared the Modest Coffee article with me that just, you know, I just was so beneficial, and we created a really great podcast episode and relationship with them as founders. And, you know, you're sharing LinkedIn posts with me. You're helping me to like keep my finger on the pulse of the industry that I somehow can't find like all the time to do on my own. And not only that, you're like connecting me with people. And I had asked you, how much time are you spending reading articles and on social media and on LinkedIn? Because I was certain that your answer was going to be like, oh my God, I'm on there like all the time. Like I'm every hour on the hour there for 15 minutes or something. And what is the real answer to that question of how much time do you spend a day? Like networking on social platforms?
Well, definitely less than an hour a day.
Yeah.
I would say, much, much less. I mean, there's some days I don't look at any social media, and I look at social media like media. So I look at it like TV. Like I look at it like I wouldn't have my TV on in the background when I'm working. And so I don't have my social media at the ready when I'm working, because I put those in the same category. Like I look at social media like, at the end of the day, you know, I want to wind down, watch a TV show. Instead of that, I'll scroll Instagram. So it's like, I look at it as I lump it into the media time bucket, which has really helped me stay on track with like not over extending myself with it as well. And then the other tip I have as far as your purpose is on Apple News, you can go to settings to follow channels and topics. I don't know if people realize this.
No.
So it's not like a paid thing. It's just on everyone's. If you have an Apple and you have Apple News, go to following channels and topics, and then you put into the search bar whatever topics you want to follow, and that's what you get fed. So I have a very, very tightly curated news feed. Like, I don't know, like somebody today mentioned the protests in Paris, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I like, I miss like international news, unfortunately, because my, what I follow is so tight, but it also is like super efficient because that's really what I'm interested in. And I can always, you know, branch out and, you know, look at the Times or whatever if I want that to look at it that day. But if you do that search in your iPhone and then you set it on the topics, and you can put in literally any topic, trust me, I have like some really, really very nuanced topics in there, and it pulls up that information.
That is fascinating. That is news to me, and I'm absolutely going to change it. On my phone.
It's great because then I'm only looking at really what I want to look at.
Yeah. And maybe not some of the terrible things that are happening that you're like, I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna read it, but I will be aware, but just not right now, or I'll carve out extra special time for that. That's a great tip. I love that so much. And so when you're on social media, let's say like you're on LinkedIn, because you're pretty active on LinkedIn. Are you thinking about, hey, I want to connect this person with that person? Or is it just sort of like in the moment you're seeing something, reading something, it triggers, you know, something in your mind like, oh, so-and-so would like this and I'm going to share it with them. Or, oh, this person, you know, has been laid off from their job or has quit their job. And so maybe I'm going to connect them with, you know, so-and-so, because there might be value in that relationship. Like, is it just kind of stream of consciousness, or do you have like a goal?
Yeah, no, there's no goal. And it's really based upon the experiences that I've had that other people have gifted me with connections. Like, I have some mentors in the industry that are industry legends that I talk to every once in a while. And they've said, hey, dairy, this person knows dairy. And they've been generous with making those connections. And so it's, recently Sarah, I was like, oh, my friend comes from produce, and you, Sarah, you worked in produce. So I'd love for you guys to talk, knowing that you have that in common, and other people have done that for me. And it's been so appreciative and gracious and interesting, really, because that's what I'm interested in. So
I find networking to be so generative. Like, you and I got connected in an interesting way. And then you've connected me, to a number of people, just like you're saying, just like, oh, you should talk to this person, or, oh, you've got the same sort of philosophy, or you help the same kind of food brands, or, your work might complement each other. Like, those folks are sent my way. And then there's also just sort of like fun contacts that we have, between each other. And then there's obviously, that sort of like, just meeting new people and just growing the number of folks we know in the community, and not necessarily wanting or needing anything from any of those people. It's just so wonderful to have them in our circles, because then when someone does cross our paths and they say, hey, we're looking for a produce buyer. Oh, I happen to know someone, like, let me connect you. Or, I'm launching a cheese brand, or I'm launching, oh, I happen to know Felice. My Chelsea, who is our communications director and our podcast, I don't know what to call her for the podcast editor, producer, all of the above things. Her mother owned a yoga studio in Dallas area for years and years and years. And she sent me a book called The Go-Giver. And I had never heard of it before. It's like a #1 national bestseller. And I highly recommend it, especially around the topic of networking, because one of the main messages, and I think there's like 4 main messages from the book, but the big main message for me was like, you don't expect anything from your relationships, right? It's giving and connecting that really brings the value. And then the energy with which you are sharing and connecting people will bring back value to you in a number of ways, right? Whether that be a new client in my case, or whether that be a friendship connection, right? Like, there's so many things that it can bring to you. But I think a lot of people, when we think about networking, we think it's like salesy, or, you're kind of extracting things from people. That book can help you shift the way that you think about it. For me, when you connect me with someone, or someone reaches out to me directly on LinkedIn, I have dedicated time on Friday mornings where all I do is have coffee with people on Zoom. And I love it. And similarly, there's no purpose other than getting to know someone, getting to know their story, getting to know where they're wanting to go in the industry. Is there any way that I can help them, in their journey and what they're trying to do? And it literally brings me so much happiness to have that time.
Yeah. It's like matchmaking, right? And when you see like 2 people, you're like, oh my God, they met. Oh my God, they're getting married. They've had babies. It's such an exciting thing. And one thing that I really encourage your listeners to do is connect, well, obviously with trade organizations, but also tap into different boards that support their industry. For example, I'm very involved in the milk boards and the dairy boards in the US and different states. And so I know I'm on their email list of sales opportunities or export opportunities, and there's avocado boards, there's potato boards, there's like a board for every ingredient practically. So if you are making a cracker out of California wheat, connect with the California Wheat Board. They exist. They're a great organization, and they will, they have trade shows, and so all of these organizations that support an industry you should connect with them.
Yeah. When you're connected with a board like that, so you're kind of getting information from them, but you can also connect with other individuals that are members of the
Yeah. Oh,
organization and the
yeah.
board.
And that's what that's really the purpose is
Mm.
like often they have job sites where, because I'm involved in the dairy industry, their job site will be like, oh, we're looking for a creamery manager or a herd manager or a cheesemaker. Or so they list all of that information. If your product has California avocado oil in it, if you're making a salad dressing, definitely connect with them because they can help you with, hiring people for operations or sourcing or, pricing. I mean, they have so much information. They've been doing it for years. They're generally pretty well funded. They're usually part of the Department of Agriculture or the USDA. So they've got like government contracts and trade shows, and it's just a really important untapped resource.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. And I want to ask you for some more kind of like best practices, but something that I'm getting from this conversation is that you are intentional about where you are getting different types of information. So you mentioned your news and how you've sort of curated your news stream on your phone, but you're also curating your inbox and your memberships in a way where you're like, these are the industries I am a part of. These are the, folks and organizations that I need to be connected to for a myriad of different reasons, just to stay up to date on news, but to also provide value and get value from what they have to offer and who they are as an organization. I think that it's probably true that a lot of us don't take advantage of those groups and those boards. So I think that's a great tip and piece of advice.
Yeah, I have a fun networking story because I was involved with the Honeybee Health Center at UC Davis years ago because I was fascinated with honey and bees, and they've got a great agriculture department there. And I was also am friends with the founder of Republic of Tea, which is a beautiful California tea brand. And I was like, you guys should do a collaboration where you've got the tea and the honey and you're supporting each other in this beautiful story of, regeneration and pollination and all of that. And they ended up doing a gift set together. Because
Cool.
UC Davis actually has this pollination center where they jar honey, and they ended up doing a gift set with the Republic of Tea. So it's like your networking benefits not only yourself, but other people. And that's so, as you mentioned, like that's a really exciting part of it.
Yeah. So when we think about you said like the value of networking, there's sort of that personal value, and then there's the professional value, I'll call it. And we want to open it up to questions in a bit, but before we do that, I want to talk about like, I think personal networking is kind of easy, right? That's the easy kind of networking. Maybe not for everybody. It might not be like super easy, but like it's just getting to know people and asking questions and, having coffee dates. That's easy. But when you're trying to achieve something, when you're trying to advance your
Mm.
business, or, maybe you want to sell your product to someone in particular, that type of networking, I think, can feel a little bit more intimidating, or like putting together like a series of puzzle pieces, that you have to kind of navigate and put together. Do you have any like tips or words of advice, or maybe how you approach networking that is like for a specific goal or purpose?
So learn these two words: warm lead.
Love that.
And don't be afraid to ask people, say like, hey, I know this is a total shot in the dark, but do you have a warm lead for Disney?
Mm,
And just see where that goes and state like your intention. That's my question whenever I'm trying to get to a goal, is like, I don't just need a lead. I need like a warm lead. I like need somebody who knows somebody,
yeah.
just to even a name,
Yeah.
or or how are you connected to them or something like that. But just be comfortable saying, stating what you're looking for and saying, I'm looking for a warm lead for XYZ.
Yeah. I love that because I think, some people might think, well, if I want to sell my product to Disney, I have to find the person who does the buying of my specific thing. And I need to reach out directly to them and get connected to them. But that's probably the worst way to do it, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a network that can connect you to someone in their network and then you can connect, it's almost like a snowball effect, I feel like, of once you finally reach that person, there's a lot more sort of like oomph behind you and whatever ask you might have of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's so rare. I don't know if I ever have in sales, like immediately found the right person to do this. But if you ask for a warm lead at a company or in an organization, somebody will be like, well, I know someone in, this other department and they might know someone. And it's like, great, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting because, person to person, it's like, I love it when someone reaches out and they're like, hey, they don't just say, do you have 30 minutes? Like, or no one ever says like, hey, can we get on the phone? Or can we, like, I'd love to talk with you, right? There's always a purpose for it, right? They come with like, hey, we seem to have the same values around, driving change in the food industry. I would love to learn more about what you're doing and how I can support you and share what I'm doing, right? Every time, yes, I'm going to say yes to that conversation, right? Because we have a common goal and they've illustrated that for me. And like, of course I want to talk to them. Or they come and they say, hey, I'm trying to do this and it seems like you've been successful at it. Can you, like you did, do 30 minutes of your time, so I can kind of learn from you. Absolutely. Because that's giving to the industry, right? And giving to others in the community. So it's like, that's a yes. So there are instances where direct reach outs and yeses, will get you a phone call, you know what I mean? But they're often not to sell something. They're often to just kind of get to know you and, have a conversation. So I think taking your time when you are trying to extract something, for lack of a better word, it makes sense.
I also didn't realize this protocol until recently, and it wasn't pointed out to me. I read it in an article and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't been doing this. And so I apologize because moving forward, I will do it. But apparently you're supposed to ask both people if they want to make a connection with this person. So I honestly didn't know that. And because that hasn't really happened to me, like people have made so many introductions over the years and it's always like, so-and-so meet so-and-so. And this is why I think you should meet. And I'm like, great. And so that's the way I've done it. But I can see the other perspective where people are like, I don't have time for this, or I don't want to meet this stranger, or I've got stuff going on in my life right now, or whatever. And so like the courteous thing to do is to ask them if they're okay with you making introductions. So I'm just going to throw that out there because I think it's something good to keep in mind.
Yeah, I sort of follow that in a way. So if I'm sending business someone's way, I will ask that person, like, let's say I met someone and I was going to refer them to you as a potential client. I will reach out to you first and say, hey, are you taking new consults? Are you taking new clients? Here's the background on this person. Are you interested in a connection? Because I will always want to give you the ability to be like, no, I'm overwhelmed, or I can't take them on right now. Or for you to say like, I'm happy to talk to them, but I'm not taking on new clients. You know what I mean? So I can sort of make sure that everyone's cozy and they know what they're getting into in the phone call. But on the flip side of that, so using you as like the example, if it's a friend, sort of like a relational connection, I don't ask you because I feel like I know that you're the kind of person who's going to say yes and get that person on the phone. And so I think how well you know someone and the nature of the connection plays a part into whether or not you sort of need to do that and check in with
That's
both
a good
people.
point.
Like if you
Yeah.
checked in with me to see if I was okay with connecting, I'd be like, Felice, don't make me send another
I know.
email.
I honestly wouldn't do that with you,
Right?
Sarah. I'd be like, yeah, this doesn't apply to you,
Yeah.
but maybe if you didn't know somebody that well, it might be a good method.
Yeah. And I think if it's a like a potential client working relationship, like unless I get the like, yeah, send anybody who you think would be a good fit my way, I'm always checking in, in before I make that connection. If it's someone who like isn't like me and carves out or like you and doesn't carve out time specifically to do it, I will ask like, hey, are you open to meeting? So I think it's like a case by case kind of thing. And then like for you, if even you're Felice and I'll do it one way for relational connections and one way for client connections. But I do think that is a good tip because there have been people in the past that have been just sort of dropped into my inbox and I don't know the referring person that well. And they, it can be weird. You get on the phone and you're like,
yeah,
hi,
yeah,
what are we here
right.
for? You know what I mean?
You just don't want to be caught off guard, I guess.
Yeah, totally. So I want to open it up to the audience here. If you have a question about networking, maybe you've got a specific goal that you want to talk about or something, we want to hear from you.
My name is Charlotte Walter, the founder and chocolatier of Charlotte Truffles, chocolate shop based in Santa Clara, California. I do have a question in terms of networking. I have a problem like making a connections with people and then I end up like friending them, like if we're talking about the dating world, I just end up just being on the friend side and never really asking for that connections, or I swing completely on the opposite side and I just ask without making the foundation of that relationship yet. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the dating analogy is appropriate because it's sort of like first the different bases, right? Like first base, home run, all of that. So you kind of have to look at it like how far have we come in, are we at second base? Are we at third base? Like where are we, and kind of feel it out that way. That's how I would approach it. And then I just feel like Charlotte, I'm sure your friends would do anything for you, do anything that, you asked of them. And you're probably over worrying or overthinking your hesitation around that. So, I mean, the worst they can do is say no, and you might be slightly embarrassed or nervous about that, but that's not the end of the world. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
I think that is the problem where I end up, when you create that relationship and they become your friends, I then start seeing it as this is a burden for them. So then I don't ask and I just figure it out on my own.
Yeah, that's super common. And get like I know it's easier said than done, but get a thicker skin around that topic and watch more episodes of Succession.
I think I'll share a little bit sort of on that topic, Charlotte, because there is a period of time where I felt very much like I have to go it alone. And even though there are people in my network, it was sort of like, what is their place and like, what is our relationship, right? And what is sort of right or wrong to like ask of them or to talk to them about. But I remember, I don't know how we ended up on the phone, Felice, but back in August, when I was like gearing up for a really, what felt like a gigantic podcast episode where I was going to share my thoughts on what was going on in the industry, I leaned on Felice and shared my thoughts with her and like kind of laid it out for her before. I had recorded the episode already, but it didn't go out into the world yet. And I wanted feedback and it felt a little scary, but I also thought I can't make this decision. I can't run this business. I can't do a lot of things in isolation.
Mm.
And it felt so good to, I didn't know if she was going to be like, yeah, do it. Or if she was going to be like, I think this is a bad idea for the following reasons. Right. But I did know that she would be honest with me.
Mm.
And so for that reason, I got a little uncomfortable and I shared with her. Right. And so for me, getting uncomfortable had so much value in the long run, right? And was so supportive. And I think it's, I think the same way of like having a team in your business, right? Like, sure, you could go it alone, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of energy, and having people with you is just so much fun. And so I would just say so much fun and so much better, you know what I mean? And you can get so much further when you have a community and you have people. So maybe just try to remember like the sort of like better together kind of motto, and if they are your friends, they want to see you succeed and they want to see you do good and they want to support you, and so I echo what Felice said, to kind of just have to get a little bit of a thick skin. And I think when you practice it, you'll go, oh gosh, this feels nice. And like, look how giving people are, and you would return.
Right.
I don't want to say the favor, but you would return the action. You know what I mean? And so that doesn't it's not a burden. And people can also say no.
True.
Right?
True. Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of times I actually haven't been able to help somebody, right? Like I don't know anyone there. I've never worked with them. I can't help you. But I do try to think of an alternative, or maybe, have you thought about this? Or it just kind of keeps the juices flowing. It's like, sometimes you need that person that's like, well, have you tried this? And it's actually not what you were asking for, but it's valuable information as well. So if I'm not able to help somebody, I always try to think of a plan B or a plan C or something, some other helpful thing.
Yeah. And also by just asking, right? Even if the person can't help you, they now know what you're seeking. And so if in their continued networking and communicating with others, they come across someone who can help you, then they can connect you. So I think there's value in asking, even if the person can't help you.
Sure. Yeah.
I also had another thought. I've been a part of conversations where I'm just meeting someone for the first time, and they say to me at the end of the conversation, is there any way that I can help or support you? And it feels weird in the beginning, but you kind of say, well, you might have an answer like, oh, well, actually, here's this thing I'm trying to do. I don't know if you can help, but maybe someone in your network can. And if I find that if I was to want something from someone, I actually ask them that question first and see if there's anything that I can help them with. And then 9 out of 10 times they would return the question to me, and it sort of opens the door for me to go, yeah, actually you could help me by I'm trying to do XYZ. Right. And so it's a mutual situation, and you open the door and offer if there's a way that you can help. And then hopefully they reciprocate. And if they don't, then you know that they're not interested in really helping you. Right. So then you don't ask, and there's no rejection. But I find that to be I like being asked that at the end of a call, and I don't do it all of the time, but sometimes I do. And it feels good to help people, and it feels good to have people ask if they can help me.
That's a great tip.
I like that. What do you think about networking events or group that is not completely focused in your line of work? So for example, the Chamber of Commerce, right? And so there's a slew of different types of people in different industries, and that's not solely what you're dealing with, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
If you have the time, I think those are great. I belong to an organization that's women in the food and wine industry, and it's really more kind of hospitality winery focused. So it's not really CPG, which is what I do mostly, but there are people there that are just personally interesting to me. They have a very organized day and time every month that they meet. And so I know like I can fit that into my calendar and I enjoy going. So if you have the time, I would definitely attend those if, but it's all people power if you can make it work. You never know what's going to come out of those conversations.
Yeah. I sort of think of those types of groups, like ones that are not specifically associated with your industry or like line of work. Like I don't go to finance related events. Do you know what I mean? Like my networking is generally focused in the food world, in CPG and catering, right? Those places of interest to me. However, like Chamber of Commerce and stuff, I kind of think of those as like a party, right? When I go to a party, I have no idea who I'm going to meet. It's going to be people from like all industries, all types of work, all types of personalities. And every once in a while, I meet someone who like we can provide benefit professionally to one another. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh gosh, well, that was really cool. Like I just came here to just meet people and see what was what. And I met someone who like we actually had a common interest and we can support one another. And we're not in the same industry at all, but that can still kind of happen. There's also the ability to meet people when you're like, you might need a line of credit, or you might need a shipping something, and they're not necessarily in the CPG or the chocolate world, but like, that they can connect you to someone who you need help with, right? Because there's all of those like adjacent needs for a business owner. So you can get kind of that value from it. But I do think it's like, if you have the time, to go. Felice, would you say that you sort of like, this might be the wrong way to word it, but sort of like prioritize or rank sort of where you spend time in terms of like social and like the boards and groups and stuff? Do you kind of...
Yeah, I think there's kind of two different people, and maybe I'm simplifying this, but there's people that are like calendar time people, and there's people that are like my husband that lives in the moment. Like he eats when he's hungry. You know what I mean?
He doesn't have like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He just has
yes, and it drives me crazy. And he'll be like eating like a sandwich at 3:00, and I'm like, "What the hell are you doing? It's 3:00." And he's like, "I'm hungry." Like, but that's how he lives his life entirely. Like work, everything. Like he's just that. That's how he works and breathes. So, but I'm like, this is when I wake up. This is when I have lunch. This is when I live by a calendar, I guess. So I think that I'm very comfortable slotting. I have maintenance Monday where I like try to only do emails, Flex Friday where I like try to leave, finish work by noon. So I have this very like designated timing, which just helps my brain relax, because I know like, okay, I'm off the clock, or, because being a solo entrepreneur, you kind of feel like, I'm sure you can relate to this, Charlotte, like you're sort of working all the time. So you have to, for me, at least, it helps sort of designate certain times to do certain things, so I can just sort of mentally check out at some point and be okay with it. And it helps. Yeah.
Any other questions, Charlotte?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you for answering all of that.
Yeah. You have a question?
Oh, I have questions.
Oh, okay. Bring it on.
As someone who has never been a networker, I have some level 1 questions, actually. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Chelsea. I am actually the producer of the Good Food CFO podcast. But before working with the Good Food CFO, I was someone who worked for a big corporation for 12 years. And so I really did not focus on networking at all, except for inside the company. And that came very naturally. Networking wasn't really something that I thought about or put effort into. And so thinking about it now, I mean, I think I just updated my LinkedIn page for the first time in at least 12 years. What are some tips or advice that you have for just getting started to expand your network?
Well, if you're comfortable using social media like LinkedIn, start a group. Start a producer of podcasts group. I don't know if there is one, but there's one now and you're the owner of it, and then start inviting people. I have a group called Women in Cheese on LinkedIn, and I think we're up to like 75 members, and they're all women in the cheese industry.
That's so cool.
And some of them came to me, found me, and they're like, hey, can I join this group? And then others I saw and I'm like, that's a woman and she works in cheese and I'm going to invite her to my group. And then we share, in resources or, help each other answer questions. And so if you're like comfortable virtually networking, then that's a great start.
Yeah. I'll share that when I was changing careers, so I was going from the corporate world I was trying to break into the food industry. And then it was very much in real life, but I remember like Googling, like, okay, what are ways I can volunteer in this industry that I want to get into? Or like, where can I find people, like kind of like you said, Felice, who are doing the thing that I want to do or that I want to like learn about. So we're using podcasting as the example for you, Chelsea, but you might have other interests and reasons for networking, right? But you might be like, what existing groups are there for podcasting? Maybe there are podcasters on LinkedIn that you can find and you can invite, reach out to them and say, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I think you have to be proactive in some way of going, either I'm going to call people to me or I'm going to go seek out the places where those people are kind of hanging out and just insert myself. I remember volunteering to be a cooking instructor. I had zero business doing that. And they were like, you can be the attendant who makes sure that none of the children like cut their fingers off with a knife. But it's what got me to meet a person who then asked me if I would, teach at a cooking school summer camp, you know what I mean? And so like that ball just kept rolling, but I had to like find the people and then just go, okay, hey, I'm here. Hi,
Yeah. Awesome. And that actually kind of leads right into my second question. Something I've struggled with my whole life is imposter syndrome and not necessarily having like the confidence to know what it is that I bring to the table, into per se a networking relationship. And so I would just ask, is that something that either of you have ever faced and how have you overcome that?
I overcame it when Donald Trump became president.
That is a good answer.
Not to get political, but I had always felt like I'm so dumb and I don't know what I'm doing. And you know what I mean? And then when you start, I'm sure we've all been in corporate situations where you're like, that dude is the CEO or that person is, owns this company. Like, and it's so shocking at how average they are, what they do. And that is always a good, for me, that's like a good wake up call to like, okay, I deserve to be here. I'm not the best at what I do, but I'm not the worst.
Yeah. I think for me, I sort of started to believe that I could bring something to the table. Like, you're not an imposter of everything, right? Like imposter syndrome, I feel like is like, I'm not like, it's like, you feel like you're an imposter of something specific in a way, right? I've never really thought about this. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but you're not an imposter of everything. So if all you bring is a smile and the ability to listen to someone, that's what you need to network, quite honestly. Right. And then anything beyond that is just sort of like gravy to the situation, right? You can bring an insight. Like, you literally don't have to be anything other than present, listening, polite, or not even polite, but like happy. You know what I mean? Like, you just need to show up. to network.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the imposter syndrome question is such a good one, because I mean, we've had podcast guests on who I am like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk to this person. And I'm so excited. And then I leave the podcast and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. And then they're like, oh, I felt like I had to check my imposter syndrome at the door, or I was so, I was dealing with my imposter syndrome. And I think too, like, other people don't think that way about you. You know what I mean? And I happen to know Chelsea for 20 years, and the number of things that she brings to the table is staggering. So I think what it boils down to is when we're networking, we're sort of exposing ourselves to people. We're saying, hi, I want to be your friend. We're saying, hi, I want to get to know you. Or like, I'd like to do something for you, or I'd like to ask you to do something for me. And that's frightening, because we're literally putting ourselves out there. And it's one of the most vulnerable things that you can do, So I think practice, maybe if it is scary, just do it once a month, take it easy, take your time as you're kind of getting into the mix of things. What would you say, Felice, are maybe if you had like 3 top tips for someone who's either getting started or who is going to start networking more seriously for their personal life or for their business? What do you think your tips would be?
Start virtually. That's probably the easiest, right? So like start a LinkedIn group, join a LinkedIn group, do that. That's fairly easy, and it can be impactful. I mean, I've had some really, really impactful networking experiences for doing that.
So cool.
Like you mentioned, try to stay somewhat focused with your interests. So like, don't, not your spouse's interests, not your kids' interests, but really, what are you interested in as a person? Like, is it really youth soccer? maybe don't go to the youth soccer networking event if you can, spend your time otherwise. So be intentional, and engage with strangers just all the time. Know that every single person knows something you don't know, and ask the checker at the grocery store how their day's going, and how long have you worked here? And, what's it like working here? And to be comfortable asking questions.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact quote, and I wish that I did, but I think it's Bobbi Brown. Is that her name? The makeup artist, right? I think it was her. And she said, like, be open, then be polite. And then like, there was something else that she said, but she was like, it was this post where she was saying, like, I made a deal with a guy in the elevator who like just happened to be the head of something, because I said good morning and was open to conversing with him. And he asked what I did. You know what I mean? Like, I think like, being open and talking to people, I think like it can literally lead to some really amazing places and to some really amazing like personal relationships and experiences.
And it challenges your assumptions. That happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I may go into, meeting a stranger, having an assumption about them or who they are, what they are. And then they'll say something that will just blow me away. And I'm like, whoa. So it's really good. It's just a great test of assumptions.
One of the craziest experiences I ever had, I was in a grocery store. The grocery store was packed. My husband was getting like things from the deli, and I was sort of standing back away from the crowd. And this old man just kind of kept like, it seemed like he wanted to talk to me, and kind of, I was like, there's so many people here. Why does this guy? And so finally I said hi, to him, and he said hello. And then I was just open to talking with him. And this gentleman he was in Auschwitz, and he had a tattoo on his arm. And it was like, if I had not been open to communicating with this person, I would not have had what turned out to be a pretty life-changing conversation and connection with a human. And he told me his story of his sister and his
Whoa.
parents and him and his grandparents. And like, it was just such an amazing human experience. Did it affect my professional life? No, but like my personal, self, absolutely. And I remember leaving the grocery store and being like, Nate, you are never going to believe what I just got to experience, and if the grocery store wasn't crowded, we wouldn't have had as much time to talk in the deli department, just he and I have no idea who he was with. I have no idea if he was just like wanting to share his story with people, but I was just so grateful that he did.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool.
Can I share a story?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So to kind of go off of what you both were saying. So in my previous life, I was an engineer and I attended a local conference here. And just like any conference, there's a talk. So I sat in and I took notes, and the guy that ended up sitting next to me came in completely frazzled. And it was just like it was not his day. So I felt bad. So I just told him, like, hey, I've been taking notes. I'm gonna, like, if you want, you can just email me and then I'll share you the notes that I've been taking. Because he asked a lot of questions during the class. And then he gave me his card, and it turned out to be the VP of engineering at a local engineering, like medical device industry. And then he told me to actually come into the facility and see if I wanted a job. And then that they wanted to create a job for me. I was
Wow.
I'm like, oh, okay. Because even the HR, when I did come in, the HR was like, I don't know who you are, but you came recommended by this guy. So yeah, just come in and sit down and we'll talk. But
That's
I didn't
amazing.
I
So
love that.
so having a
Yes.
conversation, just, I think having no expectations and just being open sparked
Yeah.
that.
And kind. Yeah.
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 And I think when I come into networking, I feel like, oh, I have a list, right? Or like, oh no, I gotta present myself this way, or like, this is my opening line, this is what I'm gonna do, and this is how I'm gonna close the conversations, and I'm gonna go to the next one. So I think that's a great reminder to just be relaxed.
Yeah, just be yourself. And like, yeah, like kind of like I was talking when Chelsea was asking her question, like you just need just showing up.
Yeah.
Right. Like literally what you did for that
Yeah.
person was you showed up and you were kind.
Yeah.
And then you never know like where that's gonna lead. It's just kind of like, like if you're driving somewhere, like don't be a jerk in the car, because you never know if like that you and that person you were a jerk to are going to end up in the same place, right? That's sort of like the opposite version of that. Like always be like, oh, I just think that's a great way to be in life too.
Mhm.
And I think too, something you said earlier, Felice, like, 15 minutes, 30 minutes of your time, like it's not that much. You also have the ability to like end a call or walk out of if you're having like an odd or like weird
Mhm.
networking experience, you know what I mean? So nice to meet you. I got to run or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's always a way out, because I think it can be nerve wracking, or like if you accept a call with someone that you don't really know and you're like, oh gosh, this is awkward, or I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, definitely have a
exit.
script of like, how do I get out of this situation? I did that when I was dating a lot.
Oh, well, Felice and Charlotte and Chelsea, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us for our very first live podcast recording of the Good Food CFO podcast. I had such a great time. My cheeks are literally hurting from smiling, and I'm eager to get out there and to continue networking. And I encourage folks, if you want to learn more about networking, if you want to, ask Felice any questions, she is a member of the Good Food CFO community. You can tag her in a post in our Ask the Community section, which is part of the free community. So any follow-up questions you have about the podcast, about networking, any of it, or sales related questions for Felice,
Sure.
she's there for you as well too. So thank you all again. I appreciate your time so much. We'll see you next time. Thank you for being with us here today. And thank you to the Good Food CFO Plus members who joined us for the live recording. In addition to live recordings, Good Food CFO Plus members get access to special bonus content and live Q&A sessions with many of our guests. You can become a member today by visiting join.thegoodfoodcfo.com. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help more good food founders find the show. I'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.